is the series, and the title of this particular work is called Volksheid. The word Volksheid itself means the sort of culture, the people's culture, and on the one sense it's to show a collection of different cultures that are evident in South Africa. On the other hand, I did like the play of the word hate. In the English it's H-A-T-E, and just added a little bit to it, because I think what happened here is a lot of aggression seemed to appear between the women. And when I start planning the work, I don't particularly plan a story or an allegory. I normally just start with different images and start working the images together and trying to see how they read together as independent elements that combine into some kind of voice. And in this case here, the voice sort of started off with this woman who's wearing a mokorotu, let's pronounce that correctly, which is a sort of Lesotho straw grass hat, and we can see that she also has sort of woven dreadlock kind of hair that is fitted into the hat. Otherwise she's totally naked, and she's facing side on to the viewer and is facing directly towards the central figure, which is a woman wearing a kapi and representing symbolically the Afrikaner nation, and particularly the Afrikaner woman. And between the two of them we have a stylized AK-45 rifle, machine gun, and that machine gun is painted in gold, which is echoed throughout the painting in splats. This gold continues as a theme right through the whole artwork in splatters, and signifies basically South Africa and its interest in wealth and gold, particularly coming out of Johannesburg. The Afrikaner woman is facing away from the viewer, and we can only see her rear, although her genitals are still facing towards the viewer, but she's holding her stomach protectively, which we can assume is also pregnant. The other two figures loaded, in other words, but she turns almost in a way that makes her look as if she's startled. And she looks, this Lesotho woman, as if she's being startled in some kind of process. She might be fearful. Something is going on between the two, and it definitely creates a sense of unease. This is reinforced with the AK once again, because the AK tends to work from sort of mouth level of the Lesotho woman through to eye level of the Afrikaans throat. The Lesotho woman is holding her breast, and she's also pointing it in a very aggressive way at the Afrikaans woman, and that can be read on many different levels. Is she offering her breast, or is she using it as some kind of weapon against the woman? The stomach also confronts the woman like an enlarged breast with a very large nipple being the belly button, and the woman seems to be striding forward in a very aggressive way. This is the more passive woman, and she's turned away, but she's looking back almost in a startled way, and she seems to respond to this woman, and there seems to be a dialogue that has been created. On the far right here we have the sort of coloured woman, and that's symbolically portrayed through the mixing of the different parts of the body in different positions, and the way we see those different parts. So this might be the front shoulder, and although this at first you see as a front shoulder, if you don't see the breast part, it looks like it's the back shoulder, and the woman's looking over her shoulder this way as she looks at her hand, and yet the breasts are in the front of the body as well, so that there seems to be a twisting, kind of symbolical, metaphorical twisting of her body that fluctuates. And then right in the front here we have a vagina painted in a very stylized way, like a kind of fish, that is facing you in a very, very confrontational, direct and open way. It's almost as if the violence has been taken in a circular motion, going around, starting over there, coming around through the Boer woman, through to the coloured woman, and then coming out to the viewer, which is you, and presumably through the audience, the way they approach the work, this kind of interaction circulates within the artwork, out the artwork and back into the artwork again, in a kinetic way of energy transfer. This woman's stomach though still faces towards the right, and she's not looking at the viewer in a confrontational way, she's looking towards the right as well, symbolical of looking towards the future and possibly to some kind of better future where there's no conflict. She doesn't seem to be involved in any way with the kind of stresses and tensions that are taking place between these two women. She merely passes it on to you, and then she seems to be looking towards the future and trying to escape from the cyclic nature of these tensions between cultures, possibly. The paintings are painted quite large. They're 2 meters 80 high. Each panel is 1 meter 43 centimeters wide, creating a quite a large confrontation mural kind of surface. One of the reasons was I wanted the woman to be quite monumental, and the woman's bodies fill each panel to a maximum amount without getting too clumsy about that. And so the woman tended to fit this space with very little gaps between, and this adds to the effect of the monumental quality of the figures, and the way that we can see the figures is that we are dwarfed by these giants. Giants that just sort of swamp you with their flesh and power, and yet they aren't meant to be ugly in any way, and they're not meant to really be conducive of a particular body type as such, although they did all land up to be quite large women and pregnant as well. The AK is a symbol that I came across quite a few years ago. It was drawn on a pot, and I used it in the series of works that I created called Forgofo. And basically it was a weapon used in the 1980s as part of the resistance against apartheid. And obviously as a symbol of resistance, it's been used in this work here. In this case here, the AK confronts the Boer woman, and it seems to float between the Boer woman and the Sotho woman. And what's interesting is the height of the machine gun butt is roughly mouth height with the Lesotho woman, but when we get across to the other side, it's exactly eye level with the Boer woman. And it gives a nice kind of sense, creates a nice sense of dialogue and a sort of visual expression, almost like a visual word that's been created between the two. And as I said, the kind of word that's been created is one that seems to have startled the Boer woman. Whereas over here, the AK has been turned up into the air, which means that it's now not so aggressive, and it's not so functional as a weapon now that it's just shooting up into the air, which is normally a kind of celebration. The coloured woman also has her hand, and she's looking into her hand as if she's looking for the future on the one hand. On the other hand, she could be trying to block what she sees in the future. And this AK that is facing up could be a symbol, or maybe not a symbol, a metaphor for what she sees in the future for her children, while the rest of us, as she feeds it back to the viewer, the rest of us get drawn into the circle of conflict and trying to escape the conflict, and then more conflict and trying to escape it. And so as we circulate, it keeps us moving in an actual physical space. So what I'm trying to do is draw you out of this as being sort a work which you only read simultaneously and from a distance, but rather as a kind of work that you read consecutively, that you need to move physically through in order to experience the work. So that your body becomes part of the process of looking, the way you walk towards the work, what distance you maintain from the work. Because what you see from a distance, where you can see the whole work simultaneously, compared to when you approach the work on a closer, intimate level, is that the surface begins to become much more dynamic and vibrating with this kind of tension between this and the spaces that are created with the splashes. And your eye, your body moves across as the clues are unfolded when you look at it. And then back and pushes you back out again and around again. And really I want the work to be experienced in that way. And needs to be hung in quite a large open space that one can approach the work from different viewpoints. Looking at the hats that the women are wearing, or the one piece of clothing that they're wearing, the hats, we'll see how the mokorotio of the Sutta woman is facing down and almost seems to be hiding her face. And disguise, almost as like a disguise, and that she becomes a person difficult to recognize. And it seems to be enclosing her body and keeping her space to herself. Whereas the Boer woman's kapi, to me it's almost like a gun barrel. It's like this circular shape facing like a cannon mouth with the face, it's behind the cannonball, facing out towards. And so in its own way, it's also quite an aggressive piece of attire. And both deal with shading the face in some way. In other words, symbolically hiding one's identity. Whereas the coloured woman's kapi seems to be a little bit different in that it doesn't deal with so much as shading the face, it's almost giving some kind of symbolical perspective to the person. And the way it's been tied in a sophisticated knot with these little pieces of cloth sticking out almost remind me as if they're like horns, some kind of animal horns, or body parts connected to the head. And yet it's really only just cloth. But I wanted to bring that out, and that's why I chose that particular way that the kapi has been tied. Obviously there are quite a few ways, sometimes on the side, sometimes on the front. But in this particular case I wanted it to look something quite animalistic. And her identity is much more revealed in terms of her face, yet in her body it's much more confused.